And REN's posed the question to us, is this a tragedy or is it a miracle? We don't know.
So welcome to the channel, Lower the Shield. Let's lower the shield together and dive into two performances, one by REN and the other by Aurora. Put out a couple weeks ago, several weeks ago maybe by now, what next for me to analyze. And these are the two that elevated themselves. First Aurora pulled out in front, and then Violet's Tale kind of had a stronger preference amongst you guys out there in the community. So we're going to do that one first, Violet's Tale, and then I'm also going to dive in and tease out Churchyard by Aurora. And there's more in common with these two songs than maybe is apparent at the surface. Both Aurora and REN are singing about intimate partner violence. They come at it in different directions and certainly tell different stories. But one is around more of empowerment, and the other is more around the tragedy and the extreme violence involved in it oftentimes. It's certainly about listening to the music, the tonality, the voicing, but there's so much more to both of these songs. The lyrics laid under it or over it. Without even having to know too much about the backstory on either one of them, whether they're fictional stories or whether they're based in reality. It's not going to matter so much as with art and with performances like that, they pull something from us that can be useful for us then to recognize that we're feeling strong emotions, we're feeling some somatic sense in the body, and then along come some emotions that come with that. It can be useful sometimes to be able to pull together different ideas around a tough subject, so that we can keep making meaning of it when it shows up out in the real world. And remembering that each of these are performances. They're artistic, and they're, from my perspective, have been very well performed and are well done. And I'm not alone. Millions of other people around the globe apparently agree. But there's something in them that pulls us in, that makes us want more, want to understand. And it might be a change that we can make in our personal lives or in the lives of people that we care about, and maybe even lives in making change within our communities and within society. There are going to be spoiler alerts. I'm not going to play it straight through. I'll be stopping it and talking about sections on it. But I've also previously analyzed Violet's Tale as part of the trilogy that REN put out quite a while ago. The Tales of Jenny and Screech. So if you want to know the whole story within these performances, I suggest you pause now and go watch those and then come back. So Violet's Tale specifically, the opening sequence is strictly music. Although, no, I take that back. It's not strictly music. There's a lot of visual coming our way also. When we lean in and we notice the songs, these performances involve a full sensory engagement from us. We got our hearing going for sure, we got our visual senses going, but then maybe some other things show up also. So Violet's Tale begins in a particular setting. The setting itself might do something to evoke some memories, some emotions, some sensory sensations. But then the music playing, the guitar by itself. And then finally, the voice coming in. So as we go into this, keeping these frames in mind can be useful to start to place some understanding as to what it is that you may be experiencing or have experienced in the past whenever you've watched it, if you've never seen it before. Otherwise, get comfortable, grab yourself a beverage or something to settle in, and let's go.
We've just heard the instrumental introduction of Violet's Tale. I invite you to check in with your body, with what might be going on, noticing any tension, any relaxation, any sense of emotion, any body sensations that may be present right now as this is starting to unfold. As I stated in the introduction, this is full sensory engagement through this performance. REN seems to be a master of this. So being able to pause and notice periodically and recognizing if there's anything that you may need to do for yourself to be loving and kind to yourself, compassionate to yourself while the rest of this video unfolds. In this segment that we just saw, REN moving from strictly instrumental into bringing his voice in may add to an experience for each of us as a viewer, maybe not. The invitation all through this is going to be to continue to check in on what's going on within your body, maybe a sense of a tightness or a softening as things progress. Maybe thoughts start coming in, maybe memories from your own life experiences might be showing up or from watching other videos. Whatever shows up is all part of being human. So to be able to navigate that and allow that to be present, or to pause if for some reason something starts to feel like it's overwhelming, to pause the video and do something else and come back to it when useful or not. There's a couple researchers, I'm going to play a clip here of an interview of them where they're discussing how art, experiencing art in general, has the ability to do things within us neurologically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually.
But I think most psychologists would probably agree that the body and the mind, so cognition, affect, motivation, emotion, and also bodily expressions are very intricately and very closely tied together. Mm-hmm. They are inseparable. And one very interesting emotion that psychologists have been increasingly interested in is disgust. And art is undoubtedly able to trigger a sense of and an experience of disgust in people, if you see something really disgusting.
And art is actually something that shows you how interconnected they are, because if we're talking about emotional reactions, there are some emotions that are very specific to the art experience, like awe, feeling small in front of a really impressive artwork, for example, but also others, for example, having chills or being moved to tears. These are emotions that are really fascinating to psychologists because they don't have any utilitarian functions. How do they help us in everyday life? Well, they don't. And they're very specifically evoked by artworks.
Hit us at all levels. And that's part of what may be going on here within REN's performances, but specifically this one as we continue to watch it and move through it.
London City, far from pretty, 2005. A lady down in Paddington is fighting just to stay alive. Rhythmic beats and bloodstained sheets, our lady weeps, she's tired and frail. To set the scene, we must rewind the hands of time for Violet's Tale.
As we move into this next section, I invite you to notice shifts in body position within REN as he transitions from place to place or moves us through the story. The shifts in his body position and his facial expressions, the gestures, along with the tonality of the music and of his voice. and of course the lighting and everything else that's come along in the performance.
Violet was a silent girl, grew up with violent starts. Her mother was a drinker and her father was a bastard. Every night he took her tie but never left the room. I'll spare you with the things he did, I'm sure her mother knew.
So here we are, we've got a little snippet of Ren introducing Violet. He set the time period for us, 2005, set the location, and he's named her. Now the storytelling is going to begin. Everything's going to change. The awareness of what shows up when we're experiencing change can apply anywhere in life. But part of what some of the threads of the content of this particular performance starts to reveal to us as viewers are potentially the cyclicalness of violence, the societal aspects of some of it, and what happens when suffering goes on in silence. So let's go on.
Violet was a silent girl, she moved out at 16. A semi-detached council flat, paid for by a welfare scheme. Packing shelves at Tesco, stacking jars like pickled bricks. She met a boy named Stevie and he was a little prick.
As Ren is unveiling this story, right now we're in the perspective of Violet's perspective. As the story unfolds, perspectives might start to change. He may introduce us to some other characters and maybe even like role shifts within his performance. Again, a reminder to continue to notice how each of these shifts and changes start to land, the emotions that start showing up, thoughts that start showing up around it as it unfolds. Being open to a newness, to the change, to shifts, to a new awareness, to developing new meaning for yourself as we continue on.
Violet was a silent girl and Violet she fell fast. See, Stevie was a wrong un, but he sure knew how to charm her. Every night he took her tie but never left the room. History repeats itself, he'd paint her black and blue and dark.
So around this part of the story, Ren is using words to describe some interactions with Violet and Stevie, that Stevie would tuck her tired, never leave the room. We heard that before. He mentions that history repeats itself. This is now taking us down into a deeper level of some psychological theories, which I'm going to take a few minutes to unpack. I think it's so important, this piece right here, on what sense we can make of it as we move forward and as we live our own lives or as we interact with people within our own lives. There's a concept, it's called trauma reenactment. Pierre Janet started identifying that when we experience traumatic events in our lives, this was well over 100 years ago, when he articulated that sometimes we tend to repeat behaviors and we go down this path to where we're continually reminded of our traumas, reenact them, play them out. Sigmund Freud picked up on it a little bit on some of his theories, repetition, compulsion, etc. But more modern day theorists also have done research on this, say, okay, well, what's happening when we are reminded of our tough traumatic events throughout our lives? One of the landmark ones is Bessel van der Kolk. He's written a book called The Body Keeps the Score. I won't say theorist, it's not the right word to describe him, but Gabor Mate, he was a physician out of Canada, is a physician out of Canada. He's written several books, and one of the books that he's written, and he does many lectures around when we experience traumatic events, especially early in our life, how it hangs on with us for the rest of our lives. So his book is called When the Body Says No. But then there's also Stephen Porges. He's, within the last 30 years, has developed a theory. It's actually a full-fledged theory called the Polyvagal theory on how the entire nervous system is engaged when we experience traumatic events, and then later on throughout life, it will continue to switch on and off, and it starts to influence the way we then navigate future scenarios, future situations. Several times throughout the song already, Ren has referenced Violet as being silent. Through Porges' lens of the polyvagal theory, he starts to describe these different fear responses that we have as humans. Some of it's also in the animal kingdom. So we got the fight and flight for sure, but then we also have freeze, but there's also one that he identifies of submit. And I allude to this in the other video, the other analysis I did of the trilogy, of where Violet goes into this mode where she submits. She goes silent. And Stevie takes advantage of that in many ways. We're going to hear Ren describe some of the ways in which the abuse plays out in addition to the physical abuse. There may be other forms of abuse that is involved here between Stevie and Violet. Let's watch some more.
History repeats itself, he'd paint her black and blue and dark. She never stood a chance. The devil comes to dance. Violet, why are you always so quiet? On her bedroom door and he's irate. He's been drinking and smoking, he's up late. And he stands by her bedside, she shakes, but her eyes stay shut. You fucking slut, I know you're up. And he pinches her eyelids and folds them up.
Notice what's showing up for you. We're looking Ren right in the eyes. We're looking Stevie into the eyes. He's in the character role of Stevie. And that may be activating something for many of us. For me, it's an intense experience to look someone in the eye. The eyes are the pathway into what's going on within many of us. So as this is playing out, Stevie's affect is intensifying. You might label it as anger or a rage, something along those lines, some form of an anger response. The languaging that he's using toward Violet is abusive language. He's name-calling. Then he actually gets physical and pulls her eyelids up. So it's a sign. It's within this short little piece of the performance it's an awareness that Violet has shut down. She is disconnected. Maybe an official term for that might be she's in a form of dissociation right now in the story. And Stevie is aggressing and he's intensifying his affect. And then we look him in the eye, and that probably activates something for many of us, if not most of us, to see that level of intensity in another person's eyes. Stephen Porges talks a lot about how much of our polyvagal activation occurs through eye contact. We can feel a sense of safety, or we can also look in the eyes and sense fear and threat and many other forms of emotions. For us viewers, looking someone in the eye and seeing the emotions in another person, because we're human and we have certain regions in the brain that are very keyed into sensing emotions in other individuals, we can feel the emotions almost like it's our own. And that can certainly be overwhelming if we're seeing rage and anger and intense upset in Stevie. And we've brought our walls down, we've brought our shields down. It could be overwhelming for us to say, oh, that is harsh, that is hard. I do not want to be like this guy. Or we may identify with him. We may say, I get it. I've been there before. I've been to where he's at right now. Then to walk away and say, what do you do with it? That's part of what we'll be teasing out more as we continue on. So let's go on with the video here. It's we're looking Stevie in the eye through Ren's eyes, and the story's going to continue.
Violet, why are you lying to me, Violet? She stays silent. Things turn violent.
So Ren just warned us. She stays silent. Things turn violent. There are many forms of violence, but specifically, if we can parse them out into two main categories, affective violence, and then a category of predatory violence. Affective violence is the form that's charged with lots of emotion, tends to be instantaneous, very spontaneous, not really planned out, and it often comes from within an individual who somehow throughout their life hasn't been able to regulate their own emotions, their own anger states, their own fear states. So oftentimes that form of violence is affective violence. Not always. Sometimes it falls into the predatory style, which would be more of somebody lying in wait, stalking, etc. So in this part of the story, we're not going to be looking at that form of violence. We're actually going to be peering through the eyes of Stevie and through this lens of affective violence.
That's the sound of his fists when they fall like a crashing pilot. Hit like hailstones, one to the collarbone, full force, full blown, blood splat, bone crack, knick knack, paddywhack, one to the jaw and the tooth spat, detached fist connects and disconnects a bone. A quick deflect to misdirect the blow, but nonetheless his punches met her throat. Such a mess he's left her bruised and broke. Violet, why you always so silent, Violet? Why you such a little liar, Violet?
We've seen the intensity of Stevie's reactions increase. The languaging, the wording that he's using now, directed toward Violet, he's accusing her of lying. He's blaming her. He's attempting to shift the blame of his inability to control himself over to her, saying it's all her fault and not his. Some people may refer to this as gaslighting. Whatever term will be useful for you to describe what it is that we're hearing here is shifting the blame over to the one that is actually being abused. We may see something like this later on when we sit and watch Churchyard by Aurora together. We may see something similar going on over there, not to the intensity of what's happening here, maybe in a different way. One of the trademarks of domestic abuse is not only the physical violence that comes along with it, but then also the psychological and emotional violence that is interwoven within the relationships that are a mainstay of the relationship sometimes. So we're seeing this here is he's shifting blame. He's not taking responsibility for his own actions. It's all her fault. If only she would have fill in the blanks, I wouldn't be so mad. I wouldn't be so angry. If only she would have answered the door, whatever. It becomes her fault rather than his. Through a compassion response from us, if we can sit and notice within ourselves what we're feeling, there may be some disgust, some anger, some contempt that we're feeling for Stevie. Opening the possibility also that some people watching this video may also be identifying with Stevie. That's part of being human also, to notice it, to be able to identify with it. Doesn't mean we have to act on it. We may have strong emotions around the people we're in our relationships with, and sometimes we may feel like we're out of control. One of the themes within this channel, if you've watched many of my other videos also already, you already hear me talk about the lifelong effects of our experiences, but even the transgenerational ones. How did Stevie become the individual that he is? What was his childhood like? What were his experiences growing up like for him? And did he have parents? How did they interact with him? Did he experience any major injuries as a young kid growing up, and that might have caused a traumatic brain injury. There could be genetics at play. All of this can be brought in to consider, to understand the behaviors, not to forgive them or not to excuse them, but to understand them, to make space then to say, okay, I get it, but it's not okay. There's a distinction between understanding behaviors, holding people accountable, pulling the accountability back away from Violet, back over to Stevie, than to excuse it, say, oh, I get it, you had a tough childhood also, so it's okay for you to go out and kick somebody's ass. Well, it's not. In most parts of the world, it's not. So to be able to find that space, say, we recognize it because we've already heard some of Violet's story, but we don't know a lot about Stevie's story and how they even came together and what path has he been on for much of his life to make him such an angry person towards the person that he's with. So let's continue on. Let's see what else unfolds in all this.
Do you think I want to do this, Violet? In character, she stays silent. Well, say something, Violet. Silence. Fucking say something, Violet. Silence. Wait. Say something, Violet.
Ren, masterfully now, is giving us some relief. He's taking us up this steep slope of intensity, of the edge of violence, of being present with some intense violence. And now he's given us some relief. He does it with a shift in his facial expressions, his body movement, the tone of his voice, and then also now what he's doing with the guitar. So he's taken us up this steep slope. He's created the tension. This is the artistic performance. But quite probably most of us watching this are feeling something within our bodies, and emotions and thoughts are running through us. And now he's given us some relief. And now we're moving into a different aspect of the story. Still more unknown because we're not to the end yet. Let's see what happens. Let's see what he's got for us.
Not one word. She stays quiet. London City, far from pretty, 2005. A lady down in Paddington is fighting just to stay alive. The doctor, in a state of shock, saw something here so very wrong. See, Violet, she was pregnant. Poor Violet, she was 9 months gone.
As the story is continuing to unfold here, Ren is taking us down into a new path for us. He's introducing several characters in this short little space. So being able to have another shift of perspective, we've maybe seen things through the lens of Violet, through Stevie's lens. And if there's space, and it's okay to do that, and if it feels safe to do it, to be able to now start to bring in the perspective also that there's some little ones about the end of the world if the doctors are successful at what Violet's just asked them to do. So let's see what happens.
Turning to the doctor, Violet broke her silence and she cried, if I'm to die right here tonight, please let my baby stay alive. The doctor soon regained composure, called the surgeon to come in. As Violet's world turned to black, the curtains closed, the lights went dim. In London City, far from pretty, 2005. A lady down in Paddington just lost the fight to stay alive. A tragedy or a miracle, it happened on these very streets. Two twins aligned side by side. A girl named Jenny and a boy named Screech.
So there we have it. Violet's tale. Ren leaves us with a boy named Screech and a girl named Jenny. A tragedy or a miracle? We don't know. we can't know. We can never know. Psychologically, there's a concept referred to as equanimity. Simply means balanced mind. Learning how to navigate life and life experiences from a balanced perspective can be useful. It's one that we're not necessarily conditioned to do. We're not encouraged to do it. It's oftentimes by society or culture or family or community. Yet it's a place to find this space. And Ren's posed the question to us, is this a tragedy or is it a miracle that two twins were born out of a murder of their mother through domestic violence? We don't know from this perspective right now in this moment. Now, from the performance perspective, maybe you do know. Maybe you've watched the rest of the trilogy and you do know about this story. But for any instance, the ability to find, is this good or this bad? And investigate that and say, well, what would it mean to me if it were one or the other? And to take that meaning forward. There's an ancient story that comes out of the Taoist teachings, the Taoist teachings. It's called The Farmer's Tale. And in that story, goes through many repetitions, and something happens in the village. The farmer finds a horse, brings it home, and the villagers say, oh, how wonderful for you. And the farmer says, maybe yes, maybe no. The farmer's taken this balanced approach while the villagers are moving back and forth from, oh, this is so wonderful. And as the farmer has the horse, the farmer's son decides to ride the horse and falls and breaks his leg. The villagers come along and they say, oh, how awful for you. And the farmer says, maybe yes, maybe no. This goes on for several repetitions. And then at some point, there's some sort of a conflict going on in that region, whatever the times were back then. The army comes into town, and they're looking for able-bodied men to go off and fight in the war. And the farmer's son can't go because of his broken leg. The villagers come and they say, oh, how wonderful for you. And the farmer continues to say, maybe yes, maybe no. Holding that balance on our situation in life can give us a sense of what's here now. And it opens us up to decisions and to choices that we might not have otherwise. When we become reactive, the reactivity of Stevie throughout this performance, throughout the story, is way too much to one side, too much reactivity. Whatever Stevie had going on within his own psyche and with his own self, whatever he was needing and whatever need he was trying to get met, wasn't going to happen if he kills the one that he cares about. And that ends up what happens. And we don't know later on what happens to Stevie. We don't know if he got arrested for any of this. We don't know anything else much about Stevie. And I'm going to encourage each of you. Some of you may be aware that maybe this was informed by a real story that happened somewhere in the world. Maybe not. Maybe it's a fabricated telling of a real-life event. The point I want to make here is that these events happen in communities all around the world all the time. They're happening right now as we're engaged in this. Is there something that we as individuals can do to help prevent such outcomes as what happened here with Stevie and Violet and Jenny and Screech? Maybe it's at the individual level. Maybe it's at the community level. Maybe it's at some governmental level. I don't know where the change can happen. So much of my life has been around working to prevent such things, and yet they still happen. But it can start individually within what are we noticing. And if we're engaged ourselves within some sort of a emotional upset, sensory upset, or something that seems to be unmanageable, to maybe overwhelming, to reach out to friends, to coworkers, to professionals, to religious leaders, to healthcare field. There's a lot of avenues of help and support that can help us when we recognize within ourselves that maybe we're doing some sort of a trauma reenactment within our own relationships. They don't have to be our love relationships. They can reenact in work settings, etc. also. To break our own cycles or the cycles that we are navigating up against, whether it's within our friend groups, our family groups, etc. It's what happens when we all sit in silence when it's going on around us. So then the tragedy might unfold. Or maybe it is a miracle. Maybe Ren has handed us a gift and we can each take the gift of the trilogy, or specifically of this aspect of the trilogy of Violet's Tale, as a gift to do something magical with it, to make a little bit of change so that stories like this don't continue to play out anywhere in the world. So with that, I invite you to check in once more, maybe take a deep breath, a sigh, and maybe just close the eyes for a minute and contemplate as you push stop, what you're going to take away with you and what you're going to leave here, wherever here is. Simply noticing that with intention, drawing something and carrying it forward that can be useful for you. And also, what are you leaving behind? Maybe an old way of thinking, maybe something else. Maybe there's nothing there that you can think of, and that can be okay too. But until next time, gently bring your shields back up as they seem useful, and may you stay free from harm and be well.